Hello everyone, this is an update video for patch 3.19 for my Dominating Blow Staff Guardian build guide from 3.18. This will be a shorter video because all of the main information can still be found in the original video. In this video, I am only going over the things that have changed in this patch, so I highly recommend watching the original video if you haven't already. I will link it in the description below. First, I just want to touch on Dominating Blow itself. It is the only minion skill which wasn't mentioned in the patch notes, so it's unchanged, but there are a bunch of other changes which affect the build. Also, in my previous video, I mentioned that the new Arch Nemesis monster modifiers might be stronger than the old rare mods when copied by Dominating Blow, but this turned out not to be the case. They're still strong, but the old rare monster mods were better for us. For the passive tree, there are no major changes to it. The mana reservation mastery is gone now, so you probably won't be able to skip using Enlighten support anymore. You can see that right now I am using a level 4 Enlighten and I barely have enough mana. Another way to get around this is you could get a helmet enchantment with increased mana reservation efficiency on one of the auras that you're running. Either Pride or Determination would probably be your best options. The enchants for Dominating Blow aren't very good anyway. The only other thing I'm changing here is that previously I recommended only using a Cluster Jewel if you needed the Blessed Rebirth notable. However, I now think the Blessed Rebirth is basically mandatory for the current endgame. You don't need this exact Cluster Jewel, but this is probably the best one possible other than the resistances. However, this combination with Renewal is expensive. I actually wasn't planning on having this jewel before making the video, but I hopped onto Standard and spammed some currency at a Cluster Jewel. This cost me about 30 Chaos, 5 Annuls, and 3 Exalted Orbs to craft, and I think I got pretty lucky. You wouldn't craft it like that in a trade league. You'd either just buy the jewel or harvest craft it. You wouldn't spam currency at it like I did. As long as you get a Cluster Jewel with Blessed Rebirth and only 4 to 5 added passives, you should be fine. And I've cleaned up the pathing on the tree in order to fit the Cluster Jewel. We're no longer pathing down here so that we aren't pathing downwards twice. Instead, we go around this way, and we link the tree up with these 2 life nodes here that we weren't taking previously. The Cluster Jewel change isn't a result of this patch specifically. It's just a conclusion I came to while reviewing the build compared with the current endgame. There are just so many sources of ground degen effects over time that will kill your minions very quickly that I think this is basically required now. I've also included an example tree with high-end cluster jewels for a level 100 character just with a lot of currency. These are not actual items that I have. These are just sample items that I created. This one is one that I have. But this one is just a sample that I created just to show which kinds of Cluster Jewel passives can be good for this build. So let's talk about leveling now. Absolution has been nerfed, but Herald of Purity, Summon Holy Relic, and Summon Phantasm have all been buffed. Overall, this is probably a buff to our leveling speed. I am also now recommending taking Holy Flame Totem early on, at least until you get Absolution. Having only Smite and Holy Relic, in particular for the Brutus fight, makes that fight almost unbearable. As soon as you finish the quest Breaking Some Eggs, this is the Mudflats quest to open the Sunken Passage, you can get either Summon Holy Relic or Holy Flame Totem as a quest reward in town, and you can buy the other one for a Scroll of Wisdom. You can and should also buy a Summon Phantasm gem at this time, or 2, and I recommend linking it to Holy Flame Totem. You can also link one to Smite or Absolution or both. Holy Flame Totem will generate Phantasms very quickly against bosses. It attacks very quickly, and each of those attacks has a chance to generate a Phantasm on hitting a unique enemy. This means that we won't have Decoy Totem for leveling, but I think this setup is better even in Hardcore, at least for Act 1. You can switch to Decoy Totem later if you want. The Holy Flame Totem also provides some regen to your minions, which is really nice. You'll still use Absolution over everything else once you get it. You can maybe consider keeping Holy Relic or Herald of Purity into endgame now after the buffs to them, especially if you're having trouble spawning Dominating Blow minions or if you don't have enough mana for a more expensive aura than Herald of Purity. I previously recommended switching to Dominating Blow after killing Dominus and getting Resolute Technique. I'm now recommending that you switch after killing Malachi and getting Multi-Strike as a quest reward. This probably lines up better with when you have enough points to get Resolute Technique anyway. and multi-strike makes Dominating Blow feel way better to play. So you may have noticed that in the skill section of the PoB, we now have skill sets. So instead of having a giant list of skills separated by blank lines for each act, I've now created a skill set for leveling in each act. This also gave me space to add some notes and reminders in this section. So you can see I've added things like when to get your gems or where to go for skill point quest rewards. Just some little convenient reminders that I thought would be helpful. Now let's talk about Spectres. Spectres received 2 nerfs this patch. The first is that they have a lower monster level, so they will be squishier. The second is that minions no longer use the monster version of power, frenzy, and endurance charges, which were way stronger than the player version, which is a nerf to the Carnage and Host Chieftain Spectres that we used. However, there may be a hidden buff to our Spectres. The Beyond mechanic now spawns Scourge Demons, and one of the Scourge Demons was the Demon Harpy. This Spectre was previously only available through a weird abuse of alternate quality Desecrate, but it should be easily obtainable now. This monster has a powerful AoE cone attack that applies a debuff to enemies, causing them to take greatly increased physical damage. In Scourge League, this Spectre was also very powerful on its own, to the point that a few of them could clear maps alone for you. Carnage Chieftain is still the best Spectre, even with the nerf, so you should always have one. After that, you should have at least one Demon Harpy, assuming they still work the same. And after that, it is your choice between a Host Chieftain, an Arena Master, which you can get in a Drox-influenced map, or a second Demon Harpy. In the PoB, I went with a Carnage Chieftain, a Demon Harpy, and an Arena Master. You can see the Demon Harpy Screech debuff in the custom modifiers here. This debuff can actually stack up to 60%, but I left it at 20% just to not pad the DPS so much. It pretty reliably gets up to 40%, but I'm trying just not to pad the DPS too much. And the final direct change to our minion gems is that Carrion Golem is going to have a lower life total after the patch. It's getting reduced life, and I think also reduced life from quality. So it's going to be a little squishier, but it's not really a big deal for us because we use it on cast when damage taken, so it's not like we have to resummon it much more often. Usually just between a map, if I see that it's dead, I will take this out and just manually resummon it once. But during maps, I don't bother resummoning it. The next topic to talk about is our gem links. So because of the changes to minion power charges, our optimal gem links have changed a bit. We should no longer use increased critical damage. Our options in its place are Predator, melee physical damage, Ruthless, or Meat Shield. Predator support is the strongest by far, but you need to manage the signal prey skill, which is kind of annoying. It's instant cast, so it won't slow you down, but it still needs to be manually targeted. Melee physical damage is the next strongest, but slows your attack speed, meaning you will generate new minions less frequently, and it will just feel a little bit worse to play. Ruthless and Meat Shield are weaker than the other options, but still good, and are about equal in terms of power. Ruthless sometimes won't add quite as much damage as PoB shows, because it only applies every third attack, and your minion's total attacks before dying might not be a multiple of 3. Meat Shield lets the minions taunt and adds about the same total DPS as Ruthless, but only while enemies are near you, which should be most of the time, but maybe not while you are dodging boss skills. Faster attacks is also an option here, but only about half as strong as Meat Shield or Ruthless, and about 1/3 as strong as Predator. The benefit to faster attacks is that you will spawn minions faster and the attacks will just feel better to use. However, another problem is that faster attacks has a very high dexterity requirement. Next, a quick note on ailment and curse reduction. I mentioned in the previous video that we become immune to curses and most ailments through our passives in Pantheon, but technically we just have 100% reduced effect of these on us. Enemies with increased curse or ailment effect may still be able to apply these, but they will be reduced so much that you probably won't even notice them. Okay, now let's talk about gear. In the previous video, when talking about mods to look for on a staff, I forgot to mention the mod +2 to level of socketed melee skills, when this is actually the best mod you can get on a staff for this build. Ashes of the Stars is still the best amulet for us, but since it is so expensive, I want to go over a couple alternatives. Your next best amulet is probably All's Uprising, with Pride Has No Reservation. Determination is also fine, but usually way more expensive. After that, your next best bet is a rare amulet with +1 to level of all skill gems, plus any good defensive stats like life and resistances. The +1 to level of all physical gems is also useful, but Dominating Blow doesn't have the physical tag, so it's not actually that great. We just have some other skill gems which do have the physical tag. The +1 to all skill gems mod is very rare, so if you can't get it, just focus on getting defensive stats on your amulet. It seems like the Kalandra League rewards may be able to generate a +2 to all skills amulet as well. I'm sure these are going to be incredibly rare and expensive. Also, getting a well-rolled Ashes is going to be even more expensive now because of the changes to Divine Orbs, so you might want to consider just using a good defensive amulet with some standard stats on it like life and resistances. The new Helmet mod for +1 to 2 to level of all minion skill gems is a huge buff to us, and you should absolutely get a helmet with this mod. It will also help offset the nerf to monster level on Raised Spectre. There are some new shields for minion builds which we can't use because we're using a staff, but it doesn't really matter because staffs can already roll great minion mods. And finally, the Abyss Jewel minion mods have been buffed overall. There's no real changes on what to look for here, it's just good news for us. The gear for Animate Guardian has also changed. We no longer use Victario's Flight. Instead, use rare crafted boots with the Eldritch Implicit modifier drops brittle ground while walking. Even with the nerf to brittle this patch, this is still your best option. Try to get good resistance rolls on these boots as well, especially Chaos Resist. Ombu's Charge is basically dead for Animate Guardian, we don't use it anymore. The option to use Mask of the Stitch Demon plus a rare crafted chest with Life as Extra Energy Shield is also dead. For the helmet now, either use Leercast, which has been massively buffed, or use a rare crafted Elder Helmet with the modifier Nearby Enemies take 9% increased physical damage. There's also an elevated version of that mod, it's 12%. It's incredibly expensive to obtain. And for body armor, now either use Gruthkul's Pelt or Doppelganger's Guise. These are kind of similar. Gruthkul's Pelt now has insane life regeneration, which will make your Guardian immortal to anything that doesn't one-shot it. But Doppelganger's Guise does something very similar while also offering a lot of damage reduction. Gruthkul's Pelt is usually very cheap, so use it until you can afford Doppelganger's Guise. Hopefully it doesn't become much more expensive with the changes to uniques, but Gruthkul's Pelt generally is a 1 chaos item. The gloves for Animate Guardian haven't changed, use Southbound. The weapon also hasn't changed, use Dying Breath early on until you can use Kingmaker when you're using a more expensive setup. Now for our flasks, the automated flask setup using gain charges when hit has been nerfed. But I think it's still the best setup and can probably still be mostly automated if you get the highest tier modifier, which gives 3 charges when hit. You may need to manually activate your flask sometimes now though. You can see that I've turned them all off just to assume that we are not necessarily always going to have them active. These are still with the old modifiers on them that gain 6 or 7 charges when hit. These modifiers no longer exist. The maximum is now 3, so it's much harder to gain charges automatically just by tanking enemies. So overall, the end game for this build hasn't changed much. The Spectre nerf hurts a bit, but we make up for it through some other buffs and changes. Frenzy and Power Charges also didn't add quite as much DPS as PoB shows because PoB assumes 100% uptime, which they didn't have. It's possible that Summon Phantasm and Herald of Purity might be worth using in endgame now over something else, but I need to see some more math on them before deciding for sure. Herald of Purity especially, though, might be worth using over a more expensive aura, especially now that Ashes of the Stars is both more difficult to obtain than it was in Arch Nemesis League, and more difficult to get a well-rolled one because of the changes to Divine Orbs, and it is more important to have the mana reservation efficiency because the mastery for that is gone. So you either need well-rolled Ashes now, or you'll need a Labyrinth enchant for mana reservation efficiency on one of your auras. Now, as for League Start, I actually didn't League Start this build in 3.18, but I definitely should have. Instead, I played an experimental Flicker Strike build on League Start, and it was a bit of a disaster. I did, however, play this in the 3.18 Gauntlet, and I reached level 88 before dying. I also had COVID at the time, so I wasn't exactly playing at, full capacity. I will probably League Start this in 3.19, but I'm also considering trying out the new Trickster with one of the new skills like Lightning Conduit. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you very much for watching this video. Good luck on your League Start in 3.19. Let me know how it goes if you decide to use this build. I would love to hear your feedback. Let me know if you think I missed anything in this video. Remember also to watch the original video just to be sure you have all the information from both, and then anytime you see a conflict between these two videos, refer to this one because this one has the more up-to-date information. And once again, good luck and have fun in 3.19.